Good morning. How you doing, everyone? This is Dr. Derrick Jones here. I don't know if we're doing a brief bio, but I'll do a quick brief bio. I'm a Walden University graduate class of 2017, first person to earn his or her PhD in criminal justice from Walden University. And I had the honor of having my chair being Dr. Jessie Lee, who is presenting with me today. So you can go to the next slide. Well, I'll let Dr. Lee give a quick bio of himself real quick.
Again, it's a pleasure again, as I introduced myself earlier today. It's a pleasure and to be partnered with Dr. Jones in his presentation. He was truly a scholar and has taken this education and has moved forward in the industry and is doing very well. And I'd like to see all of you in the future on our next symposium as well. Go ahead, Dr. Jones.
Thank you. So just a quick, the presentation we're doing today is a analysis of secondary or archive data relating to law enforcement practice in reference to minority communities, recruitment, diversity training. The benefits of cultural competency will be analyzed and discussed in detail as we move along in reference of law enforcement agencies, how we can improve relationships between minority communities and the law enforcement community. You can go to the next slide. Introduction. Basically, I'm not going to read word for word, but I'm just going to do a summary of the information that's on the slides. But the United States has long been known as the great melting pot, which simply means that we have several different ethnicities and a combination of ethnicities that are in the United States. That being the case, it is vital that we as criminal justice practitioners understand the habits, the cultural rituals, the mannerisms, attitudes, if we're to best serve our communities as law enforcement practitioners. The landscape of America is continually evolving as we are mixing these ethnicities together. And it's important that individuals that enter into law enforcement understand the difference between the different cultures so that they can best serve the citizens that they're sworn to do so. Next slide. Diversity in policing, super duper important. I myself, retired police officer, one of the largest municipal police departments in the state of Maryland, got a chance to work in 2 different departments, and diversity is key because it's shown law enforcement agencies have made a conscious effort to continually diverse their sworn personnel as we've added women, especially Blacks, Latino and or Hispanics and Asians into the fold as far as what we need to do. Police departments should resemble and reflect the communities that they're sworn to serve and protect. It can't just be the traditional white male that is a police officer. And that partly contributes to several of the negative incidents that we've seen as far as shootings, strangulations, and so forth, hangings in the custody of police, as we don't understand one another, and when we don't, bad things tend to happen. Recruiting is is an area that needs to be addressed as far as some departments don't do enough, others do, but we have to do enough to make sure we're incorporating every ethnicity, every subculture that we have so that police departments can operate more effectively, especially in terms of DEI or diversity, equality, and inclusion. And community policing serves a role in this purpose. Next slide, please. Community policing. I know a lot of people have heard the term. It seems pretty simplistic. So again, I'm not going to read off the slide. I'm just giving you my overview of what community policing is. Community policing is a principle where that's different than traditional policing. Community policing is proactive, which means trying to get ahead of the problem instead of waiting for the problem to manifest and continue to grow and evolve into something that we can't control, which happens in a lot of different communities around the country. Community policing assigns one specific police officer to work a certain beat or post, which that police officer each and every day, when they're assigned to work, goes to that post and is allowed to develop a rapport with the individuals that live in that community. Okay, that rapport can lead to information that is given that would not be per se given to an officer just rides up and members of the community don't know who he or she is. The rapport is established by working foot patrol, bike patrol, and each and every day that person works. When I was a police officer, I worked the same post for 15 years. I've developed rapport with the members of those communities, and it helped me to lessen the serious call shootings and illicit drug sales and so on and so forth. Just touching on second bullet here, community policing is a philosophy approach to fight crime that supports the use of a partnership. So what we're trying to do is make connection with community stakeholders, whether it's business owners, individuals at churches, the priests, so on and so forth, community leaders, community association leaders, and such, so that we together as one police officer cannot solve the ills of a 3 or 4 mile radius and that he or she is being assigned to work. Next slide. Again, the need, we have civil unrest, multiple happenings spawn for the creation of community policing. It really starts from the unrest from the civil rights movement in the early 60s. This is where police identified that there's a need to not just ride around in a patrol car and be reactive to crime, however, get in front of it, be proactive. And the best tools that police can ever have are the citizens in that area, as most areas have a diversity of type of individuals that live there, those that are retired, those that work, younger, older, so on and so forth. And the people who are around, they can serve as your eyes and ears and are the best witnesses that we can have. Police agents across the country, again, have realized a serious problem between the police department and the citizens, specifically Black and minority communities, and the change needs to obviously occur. Community policing serves a huge role in allowing this change to occur. When we have one negative incident, policing is the one industry, I believe, that when a negative incident occurs, it's not just one person that takes the brunt. It is the entire law enforcement community that takes the brunt of that negative action. Next slide. I think this is where I'll bow out and I'll let Dr. Lee take over. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. So we talked about a lot about what community policing has been perceived and should be, but to be effective, one of the things is we have to have accountability, and we need to come up with realistic measurements for our community policing. There's not a lot of data on how effective community policing is. So when we talk about community policing as a whole, we have to look at our measurements. Are we still measuring using crime as our benchmark, meaning that the number of arrests that we had? We know that it's traditionally that most community members won't report crime. So there's a lot of underreported crime that's not being reported. Community members really have a hard time not trusting law enforcement for a lot of different reasons, but we can build that trust back by our approach. So when we do our evaluations and we do other things necessary for recalibrating our accountability, you give officers the tools that they need to be effective community policing. We make sure that our hard skills, meaning firearm training, defensive tactics, we are required to do these things 2 or 3 times a year. There needs to be a focus and a realignment on our soft skills. We may only have DEI training, that diversity, equity, and inclusion training once every 3 years, or when something goes wrong. And what happens becomes a check off the box training. We have to make it part of our culture. To have community policing and to be able to actually go into a community, we need to understand the culture of that community we're serving. One block, depending on what town you come from, may have a different culture than the next block in the neighborhood, or community-wide may be different than the next community. So when that officer goes into that community to serve, it's really critical that they have a cultural awareness of the people they're going to serve. This starts the trend on developing a trusting community policing engagement, where we are training individuals to work on their soft skills. It is less likely that an officer will utilize their firearm. It's about 1 to 2% of an actual officer that will utilize his firearm. You can go to the next slide. And when we talk about that, they're more likely to utilize a soft skill training for de-escalating the situation a lot faster than they will So we need to make sure that we are engaging in emotional intelligence for our officers, working on our soft skills, if we're going to re-examine measurements and matrix so that we're going to actually become more efficient in our community policing model. So we're going to start to look at our leaders. The leaders have to develop a vision, and they need to also make sure that that vision is communicated from top to bottom. We need to make sure that those meaningful strategic planning methods are part of our everyday goals. It's a part of our mission, part of our value, and part of our performance. We need to make sure that these mechanisms to promote officer accountability is in place. So when we start to consider accountability strategies, we need to look at that low-hanging fruit. What are we measuring? I'm not looking to see how many people are arrested. I want to see how many crimes we deter. We want to make sure that we reduce crime, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to arrest everyone. We have to look at the other tools that we have, and the term is community policing. It takes everyone in the community to make this change. We can't just rely on law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, but we need nonprofit stakeholders. We need the medical professionals. We need everyone in the community to be held accountable and to hold each other accountable. And we need to take these measurements to see how effective we're doing. If we continue to do the same thing, then we need to make sure that we need to make those adjustments where we need to make the adjustments so we can continue to move forward. Next slide, please. So when we start to define accountability, realistic measurements, what are they? We want to make sure that we are focusing on how effective the people start to speak to me. Are they able to start to report more crimes? Do they feel safe? Do they feel welcome to come up and talk to us? We want to make sure that we provide everyone the knowledge. That doesn't mean just law enforcement. If we do DEI training for law enforcement, we need to let the community know what we're doing, why we're doing it. If we're going to set up roadblock checkpoints to deter individuals for drinking and driving, we need to let the community know we're doing it. Our objective is not to make the arrest, but is to let people be aware of, we want to reduce them from drinking and driving. So again, it's changing the philosophy and really engaging and looking at making sure we have the tools and the capabilities. The capabilities come in with more training, soft training, and we need to make sure that we are doing DEI training as effectively and efficiently as we're doing our firearms training. We need to make sure that we do that twice a year as well. So even if we do our firearms training, why not partner along and do our soft skill training as well? Critical thinking, suspending judgment. All those skills are critical in really building a strong community partnership and collaboration, because I'm not just making a judgment based on what I see, but I'm going to critically think and evaluate before I react. So these are the types of things that we need to look forward to. And next slide, please. And go beyond that. So right now, any questions we're open for at this point in time. We look forward to anything you have to ask us.
Thank you. Our first question is, please provide your thoughts on how the industry of policing can recruit viable candidates into an industry that is viewed by so many in minority communities as lacking core values.
I'll like to stab at that one. So I would say that I worked at a department, police department was 700 sworn officers strong at the time. I started in 1996. And you can't go recruiting qualified minority candidates if you're not in places where they are at. So I would say go to your HBCUs, your historically Black college universities, and set up college fairs there. Go to the malls within the urban areas, and have your recruiters be individuals that look like the people that you're attempting to recruit: females, African Americans, Latino and Hispanics, and Asians. I think that's the best way to go in and try to show that this is what you can be. I think that's it. You can't go to a mall in the middle of nowhere where the minority population is 2-3%. Expect to drum up support as far as minorities are concerned. I love this. When I began teaching high school, I took a group of students to a symposium at the Maryland Police Training Commission, and they were there recruiting, and every agency, every law enforcement agency in the state of Maryland was there with representatives, and they all had minorities there. That's how if you can see it, you can be it. That would be my take.
I'm going to add a little more to that as well. We did a study several years back on screening in versus screening out. In the law enforcement community, we have a tendency to look to screen individuals out that could be potentially great law enforcement individuals. Some of the best people, and even what gave me empathy, was an individual who went through something as a child or juvenile, and they should not be punished the rest of their lives through going through a challenging moment. That individual can actually bring about the empathy that's needed in the criminal justice system. So we need to look at how can we screen someone in and how they will fit in this new process of a community policing model. Whereas our advertisement, if I'm looking to recruit individuals, I don't want to see someone that's standing with a gun or a rifle. I want to see someone who has service industry on their mind. So your recruitment reflects the mission of your organization. If your mission of the organization is to reflect that of community policing, then your hiring practice must mirror that as well. So I'm looking more of screening in and making sure the academy reflects those things as well. So when I go to recruit, everything needs to reflect each thing. So it's just not one piece, but it's a reflection throughout.
Awesome. We've gotten some great feedback that they love the idea of focusing on soft skill development. And our next question is, how do you combat institutionalized racism in minority communities?
I'll give a stab at it first. I think that's a great question, first and foremost, but it starts in the home. We have to, go back to teaching more morals and values at the home level, in terms of when we get out and into the street and we're away from our family and our parents and guardians who are teaching us right from wrong, so on and so forth. And it's the image that's also projected in social media, whether it's the news media, social media, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth, where we always see, African Americans doing something negative, selling drugs, pants hanging off the butt, a tattoo, smoking weed, whatever the case may be. We have to show them the opposite. We have to show them that that's not the case for everybody. Most of the meetings I show up, it was very refreshing for me to start at Walden, did this doctoral process many moons ago, and run into Dr. Lee and be like, wow, somebody looks like me. That gives you hope that you can do it. If you see it, if you're constantly seeing negative images, that's to me where the institutionalization comes in. You constantly see somebody black getting locked up. African American men, 7% of the United States population, according to the U.S. Census, but 40% of the people that are incarcerated in prison. That's a problem. I mean, that's the image that say, hey, I'm black, I'm gonna go to prison. That's just that's my track. That's what I'm supposed to do. I just don't think that is. We have to show positive images, to recap, from the home and on media, if we're to ever break what is supposed to be the status quo.
And just to add a little bit more to that as well, officer wellness is really critical. When you mention burnout, when you're in law enforcement, a lot of times you get called to the worst of the worst situations. And yes, you do get burned out. And this is where we have to partner. Not only we talk about our communities, but even in our internal stakeholders, law enforcement, we need to make sure that they're getting the assistance that they need. So that if they're getting burned out, that they have a place where they can actually unwind, recalibrate, and be engaged in other events and social events where every minority, every person can be highlighted in a positive image, where they're not just focusing on the negative day in and day out. And that's where the supervisors come in, that they need to be in alignment with their officers and their leadership wellness.
Awesome, thank you. That kind of moves into our next question. How do we ensure that officers who come in with good intentions don't get burned out and jaded and lose the necessary soft skills? Now, Dr. Lee, you already begun to answer this question. Dr. Jones, is there anything you would like to add?
Oh, absolutely. I think Dr. Lee has hit the nail on the head. It's a complete the system of that agency that you're working with, where I happen to work for what I would consider a very well-rounded agency that on a weekly basis your mental health and your well-being was being addressed and was like, hey, if you need to come in and talk, please do. If supervisor, first level supervisor, sergeant, if he or she saw that you were maybe acting a little looked a little down or not in your normal state of being, your manner, they will pull you aside and ask you. They had to have those resources available. It's important with the in-service training that happens in most departments at least twice a year for X number of hours, depending on the agency, the jurisdiction of the agency and the level, that you reinforce those soft skills that Dr. Lee spoke of. Police at some point in time transitioned over history from being service oriented to being law enforcement, and that's the focus. And to me, that's the error right there. You shouldn't always show up on a call as a law enforcement officer. They would go with the term law enforcement to enforce the law. Sometimes you should show up as a police officer or a civil servant there to serve the community, to say, hey, what's the problem? I know this, for example, I probably let go so many people that could have been arrested based on the fact that we resolved the issue where both parties were happy and we were able to de-escalate the situation so we can move forward. So I think definitely emphasis needs to be on soft skills and the de-escalation. When police show up, everybody is excited. I'll give you an example. A car accident, motor vehicle accident. I used to always show up and say, it's not called an on purpose. It's called an accident. So let's relax, let's calm down, because everybody's on 10. I'm trying to get them down to 1 or 2 so we can discuss what happened, exchange information, and do what we need to do.
Amazing. Our next question is actually a set of two. What are your thoughts on community policing after hours periods in high risk areas? And who do we count on to engage our youth?
On this one, I'll take the first part of this. When we really start looking at policing at high risk, you can do community policing even in the middle of civil disturbance. You want to be able there to find out what they need, what they're protesting, identify those things, identify with them. 9 out of 10, at the end of the day, that law enforcement person is a community person as well. They're not a cop or a police officer 24/7. At one point in time, they're a family man, family woman, or whatever. They got to go back to the community as well. So they have a stake in a lot of times what people are protesting or the high risk environment that they may live in as part of the environment where they serve. So it's really important that community policing is not something you turn on and off. It is truly a philosophy that is being taught. And if it's taught and carried out all the way through, even during those high risk areas, there's going to be someone in the community that buys in and supports you that will actually step out and assist you in reducing that high volume crime area. They'll be there to support you. And who do we count on engaging youth? Everyone. Not only law enforcement, the community, your neighbors, everyone engages in really helping the youth. A lot of people are afraid to engage anyone anymore because we got used to hiding behind technology. And if you looked over the last year or so, crime has gone up in a lot of major cities. But we see it a lot more because of social media. But what we don't see is people engaging to reduce and help this. We see a lot more stand-byers, people videoing instead of engaging and reducing this. So every time that we engage a young person doing something inappropriate, if we have a conversation with them, it's less likely they're going to repeat the problem. It's no different than our own lives. Every time we do something wrong and we let it go, it's okay to do. So by addressing a young person, anyone, that can make the difference because it starts that simple word of respect. And once we get that back from the classrooms to the corners, to the house, to the streets, that respect goes with them, just like community policing. It just doesn't come on. You don't turn it on and off. It's there with you.
Yeah, I like to, double down and back everything Dr. Lee had to say. Community policing 100% is a principle. It's a philosophy. It's not a switch. We cut it on and cut it off. It exists. Once you use it, I used it my entire law enforcement career. It works. It's very effective. I had very good numbers as far as calls for service related to serious arrests and serious calls natures and such. When you start dealing with the youth, I'm a firm believer and advocate for the program. Some of the programs, Shot with a Cop, the career day at some of the schools, anything where the community, especially young people, youth, can see the police. We aren't robots. A lot of times, I would hear, people say, "Hey, I called you at the station. You said you weren't there." I'm like, "Yeah, I got a life. I got I'm married. I got kids. I go home." And I think that's an important part. They understand that we're not robots. We're human beings. And the earlier you can reach out and get to a youth and get a person to understand that, hey, I'm here to help. I'm not here to hurt you, and you have to let your actions be that. I was always a community policing advocate in the sense that everybody just didn't go to jail. Even if I had enough even if I've established probable cause to take them to jail, wasn't always the best solution to the problem. Whereas though that's being a problem solver, being somebody, an advocate of that community and the youth to come up, especially in the minority community, to show that I'm not the enemy. A lot of times I used to resent working in minority neighborhoods, but I understand once I became educated that it was really a necessity for me to be there for them to understand that, hey, here's somebody who looks like you that's not your enemy. It's somebody that comes from the same community as Dr. Lee said. I come from the community, and it's all of our jobs to help educate and to inspire and encourage youth.
Awesome. That was our last question. Dr. Jones and Dr. Lee, is there any final remarks that you would like to add?
Yeah, I just like to thank everybody for coming out and attending the symposium. This is important work that we're doing here for people to understand that, just because one incident happens and it's something negative that they'll put on social media doesn't mean every police officer is bad, doesn't mean every police officer is out here to get you. I would say 95%, if not higher, are there because they want to serve and protect and make a difference in the community.
And in closing, I agree. Continue to pursue education, both formal and informal. Remain humble and remember that no one person, we should be able to approach everyone. Share your knowledge. I think that's the only way we're going to really come up with a truly effective police model. When you see someone's doing wrong, correct the behavior. I don't care if it's law enforcement or the community, just do it in a proper, safe place. Make sure that when you do make that adjustment, make sure that you do it safe and well. And we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the symposium.